You usually see this kind of bike either in museums or as unique pieces from high-end customizers, but Yamaha took a chance. They have actually brought the XSR 900 GP into mass production. It will be in dealers' showrooms for the 2024 season, and I had the opportunity to test ride it for you here in Portugal today. And of course, I have a lot to share. What did I like and what didn't I like? There were a few things that we'll have a look at together now, so come with me. Guys, I'd like to ask you something right at the beginning. Who else was so excited when the first pictures of this bike appeared? Please let me know in the comments, or at least give me a thumbs up. I think it's unbelievably great that Yamaha dared to do this and put the bike in the dealers' showrooms like this. I think this look is just great. It reminds me of my childhood when I used to draw bikes and racing cars. Of course, it looked exactly like this in the glory days of 1989 to, let's say, 1992. It's pretty much exactly the same design as the 500cc GP bikes from the YZR 500, as it was called back then. It just really touched my heart and made it beat faster in a direct way when the first photos appeared. Now I've had this opportunity to ride the thing today, and I'm really excited because it rides really well. But first, let's talk about a few design-related things. I think it's a bike that you either like or you don't like. You heard me. I like it. I think it's really great, especially in this red, white, and yellow color scheme. It's also available in black and gray, but I have to be honest that the design is a bit lacking. This is, of course, very, very important, and I have a funny personal anecdote to tell right at the beginning. What was the first word I was able to write? What was it for you, perhaps? Mom, Dad, your own name? Thinking about it now, it was almost alarming for me. It was Marlboro, but not because I somehow grew up with parents who smoked. No, actually because I loved drawing as a child, and what did I draw? Formula One cars and bikes, of course. Exactly this design, that's it. An iconic color scheme, murderous. I have to say, really, really good. If you look at the design for a bit longer and let your eyes wander over it, you can also see that the proportions are incredibly harmonious. So I'll stick with this comparison to the old GP machines, this V4 two-stroke from this V4 two-stroke era. Yes, that was simply something great. And they also had such proportions that the front of the vehicle was actually roughly in line with the axle of the front wheel, and it's similar at the rear. So here too, here the rear is in line with the rear wheel axle. So it's incredibly compact and graceful. Of course, this angular rear end also pays homage to this era. And here too, it has to be said that the design, the way the whole thing is made, including the loving details around it, is really something. Hats off to Yamaha. I think it's great. If you take a longer look at the front end and let your eyes wander, you can see some really lovely details. For example, there are quick release fasteners up here in the form of cotter pins. Down there, you can also see quick release fasteners with a locking lever where you can release them by hand. And also around it, these implied wind deflectors for the hands, which was simply state-of-the-art in terms of aerodynamics at the time, or these specially developed antlers that support the fittings here, but also hold the inner lining of the front section in place. Here too, you have to say it's really, really cool how they've done it. The handlebar and mirror with a bit of old school styling too, I would say, just suits the whole thing fantastically. And the design, I think I've said it 3 times now anyway, is really, really cool for me. But with all the retro that's in there that you get at first glance, you have to mention that the bike is, of course, the most modern Yamaha has to offer in terms of its base. In other words, the most modern that the Yamaha mid-range has to offer. Of course, it's no secret. There is this CP3 engine in it, the grandiose 3-cylinder, which you already know from the XCR 900, the basic model, the naked bike, but also from other machines such as the Yamaha MTO9 or the Tracer 9. This is really proven 100 times over, and especially in this last expansion stage, here came the big update for this model generation in 2022, where the displacement was increased by 43 cubic centimeters, where a few more horses were added. The smooth running has been improved. The transmission got a few more gears. The gear ratio has been adjusted. And yes, the bike lives from the engine, from the transmission. It is simply a centerpiece. And you have to say that this 119 horsepower, these 93 Newton meters, that is simply something really great for the country road. You've got plenty of power in the middle. From 4,000, 5,000 revs, it revs up wonderfully. Then at 6,500, 7,000 revs, it picks up again and then fires right up to the limiter. It really is a joy. A little bit of winding out, and together with this short ratio transmission, yes, it's just perfect for the country road. But we weren't just on the country road today, we also had a real highlight with us. We were at the Circuito de Estoril, which is an old traditional racetrack. Of course, Formula One used to race there, and we took advantage of that for photo shoots. In other words, we didn't drive full laps there or somehow measure times. No, it was actually more with the focus that we could provide you, dear viewers, with cool photo material. But of course, I used it and those half laps that we were able to drive there before we had to turn around again to get a feel for the vehicle and the concept. And that's where I'd like to start now and look at the components. And I would like to start with the suspension fork. The suspension fork is not the base material. Base material, that sounds so pejorative. Well, what the standard XSR 900 has inside is by no means bad. But here we've used what's in the MT09 SP. This means that we really have full adjustability of the component, and we can even adjust details such as the high and low speed rebound and compression. So that's also separate and adjustable. You have to say it really is a good component. And these figures, these adjustment ranges, that doesn't just read well on paper. I was really impressed with the fork when I was riding it, how it responds, how plush it is, how much support it offers on the brakes. I mean, of course you have to say that Yamaha has a more road-oriented vehicle, but I'm quite sure that you could really get something out of it for track day rides and the like. In other words, if you want it to be even sportier, a few revs here, a few clicks there, then I have to say it's also great. And yes, I really provoked it. I also pushed the car really hard in the corners and pushed it to the limit. I have to say, even the rear suspension strut doesn't give in. It gives you good stability and good support. All in all, it really is a harmonious, full, fascinating riding experience. Maybe that real pull in on the brakes towards the apex of the corner. You have to say that there is a noticeable difference to a racing motorcycle, such as an R6 or an R1. But basically, this is a really sporty bike, and I think this ride on the racetrack proved that. And of course, on the racetrack, you can also pay attention to other things. So what might not be so noticeable on the road becomes very clear on the racetrack. And that's where I'll address the first point of criticism, namely the braking performance. We have a wonderful Brembo fitting at the top, which is adjustable, a 300 millimeters disc at the bottom, but still radially mounted brake calipers. However, it has to be said that the brake pressure builds up rather listlessly. And you can decelerate with one finger, so that the braking is really sporty, so that it really comes to a sporty stop. But you need a lot of force, and this pressure point, I would have liked it to be a bit more crisp. Now, of course, you can look around and say, okay, what's the problem? For example, we don't have any steel flex lines, and I think that's exactly what this bike might have deserved. Maybe they could have made it another 100 euros more expensive for that reason. I would really have accepted that. I have to say, if this braking performance would have been even better suited to this sporty claim, to this sporty look. But of course, you can help yourself in the aftermarket sector. Steel flex brakes can be retrofitted, and slightly more aggressive brake pads can also be retrofitted. And then hopefully there really won't be anything to complain about in terms of braking performance, which would be really great. Of course, this is criticism at a high level, but when you have such a classy vehicle under your belt that is going in this sporty direction, I think you can mention something like this. Let's continue with the electronic gimmicks, with the electronic components that are on it. We have a wonderfully huge, clearly legible TFT display in the cockpit. This display, which we only know from the standard XSR 900, is fortunately a thing of the past. Back then, it was only 3.5 inches in size. Now you really have a large display inside, as befits a modern bike. even if it looks retro. In terms of adjustability, it also has all the options you could possibly think of and wish for. Basically, lean angle dependent sensors, i.e. Cornering ABS and lean angle dependent traction control are included. I can play with the whole thing in various modes and configure it myself. And it's super cool that you can also switch off individual parameters. That means, for example, if I want traction control but no wheelie control, I simply press the button, press wheelie control to off, and still have the rest perfectly available as support or backup, depending on how you want to see it. And I always like it when the motorcycle manufacturer really gives the user freedom over all these functions. And I just wanted to praise that here. Since the last engine update, I mentioned it before, 2022, teething troubles have also been a thing of the past. In the past, maybe riders of the old MT-09 know that the throttle response, the load changes were often a bit rough in the past. Now it's really silky smooth. I've tried it in street mode, in sport mode, in rain mode. So even when you switch to the sportiest mode, you still have a really sensitive, finely responsive throttle feel. The engine is also very responsive. You have to say, great solution. Really great. If we continue with the electronic gimmicks, the quick shifter, you already know it in the form it's in here. Up and down without any problems. Really, really good. You can also downshift with the throttle open and upshift with the throttle closed. So if you're rolling into a town, but we're still in battle beforehand, and then in the town you simply shift up from third to fourth or fifth to reduce the volume. So the engine is there, the elasticity is there, as is the smooth running. You can perhaps also see this a little in the driving recordings. I've always had high gears in the towns, simply to cruise through them comfortably. I think it's great. In terms of noise development, it's definitely suitable for the Tyrol. 94 decibels. That's really quiet. But I have to say, from the airbox, this sound, they also adapted it at some point. I think the MT-09 already has a bit of this adapted airbox, this sound characteristic inside. It sounds really cool in the saddle, so it sounds really, really good, you have to say. There is also an optional Akrapovic exhaust in the accessories, which some bikes had on. And when they rode past, there was often a slight pop when you let off the gas. So I would definitely recommend that. Of course, you have to invest again, but this exhaust, which is fitted here, is visually very, very modern, in my opinion. And the Akrapovic, which is then raised further at the rear, is a complete system, by the way, which completes and underlines this retro appearance once again. So that would be something I would definitely invest in. And now the question to you, dear viewers, would you invest in the nose cone? There's this lower part of the fairing here, which covers part of the engine and of course the exhaust system at the bottom. And I think it brings you a bit closer to these old GP machines. I just liked that even better. I have to say that the journalists with whom I chatted a bit during the lunch break were divided in their opinions. Some said, no, that's exactly how it has to be. Others said, no, I see it the way you do mechs. That needs down this part to just get a completed look. Let me know what you think too. Let me know in the comments. And if you look closely at the photos, we have this lower layer panel on the machines, as I said, but it wasn't exactly the same white. And that bothered me. And you can see it in the sunlight, it's off-white. In other words, we have a metallic effect in here, and it has a light cream tone. It has an almost pearlescent shimmer in the sunlight. And this lower part of the cladding is just a classic, completely normal white. However, we were told by the Yamaha representatives that this was due to the pre-production products that we were allowed to ride here in Portugal. Supposedly, it will ultimately have the same white in series production. It would definitely be desirable because from my point of view, with a bike like this, you have to look at the details, and that would be really important. So I would be really happy if they could make it in the same white. Now, I've completely lost my way here. We were actually working on the electronic helpers and riding impressions. In the riding impressions, we might continue with the topic of ergonomics. I'll just sit on it for you now. It's like this. The seat height has increased by 27 millimeters from the standard XSR, but the footrest position has also increased. The footrest position has moved 26 millimeters further at high RPMs and 26 millimeters further back than on the base XSR, as mentioned. In other words, anyone who has done the math now knows that we are now sitting a millimeter higher overall, but that also needs to be put into perspective because they have reupholstered the seat. It is now a little more comfortable. It was a bit harder on the standard XSR. How should I put it? It was more uncompromising. Let's put it that way, at least in my memory. And this one is now better padded. And yes, due to the fact that it now has an insanely slim center, the seat also thankfully goes all the way to the front of the tank. That gap at the base of the XSR always bothered me a bit, but now it's really fine. And of course, it's not a single seater now. There are also details in the seat, such as these fold-out pillion footrests, which I think are great. They might have copied them from a few Italian bikes. I can think of one or two that have them. Of course, you can also loosen the rear hump with 2 screws, and then you theoretically have room for 2 people to ride out. Why theoretically? Because I believe that the XSR 900 GP is definitely a bike that wants to be ridden alone, that wants to be ridden sportily, and that's what this riding position suggests. I'm really actively leaning forward. I have a lot of pressure on my arms. After the 200 kilometers we covered today, I think it was 210 kilometers, I noticed that I could definitely feel it a bit. But you have to say, we had a lot of passages that we rode up and down. We also had some closed stretches where we were really able to explore something sporty. And yes, the trail braking, a brake and all that, you can really feel it in your arms after a day's ride like that. But nevertheless, I wanted to mention that, at least for me, with my 190 meter limit, it is incredibly comfortable to position my feet or knees in these bulges here on the tank. So I can really position myself with my knees and also with this contact surface here on the footrests, lower legs, with the boots spread out perfectly. And when I keep thinking in these braking phases that I'm simply taking the weight off my upper body and making sure that I have a good knee angle, then that was a direct relief. If you actively practice this a bit, I always reminded myself to do this, then it also works wonderfully smoothly with the forearms. And then I think day tours are also easy peasy. In terms of comfort, care has also been taken to ensure that the technology that is available has simply been implemented here. Even if this is not absolutely necessary, we have installed cruise control. I think it's great that cruise control is included. On the highway, we had faster stages. If you put the cruise control in at 120, 130, 140 kilometers per hour, you still have enough wind pressure on your upper body that the wind provides a bit of relief, so to speak. And I sat really well on the highway. I would never have imagined that. And you can't expect miracles from the wind protection overall, of course, but I would say that the upper body is taken out of the wind up to the beginning of the rib cage. The head and shoulders are free in the wind, but because the upper body is tilted so far forward, it's far from uncomfortable. And I have to say, I really like that too. And yes, I'm looking forward to it. Maybe we'll get to test it over the course of the season to see if it's enough for a multi-day tour. I would definitely like to try it out because I really like the bike. What else can I tell you about the ergonomics? The levers in the cockpit are all adjustable. That means the brake lever, the width adjustment, the clutch lever too. Incidentally, the locking mechanism and the shock mount for the clutch lever is also a really wonderful solution. So he did a really good job with this bracket, with the corners cut out in the style of lightweight construction. And it's not just the levers that are adjustable, but also the detents themselves. I'll get of it now. If you find this knee angle too acute in the standard position, you are advised to use the bore further down. And then you have here, well, I would estimate 1 centimeter, or maybe it's 1.2, 1.3 centimeters, the possibility to set the detent downwards. And that opens up the knee angle and makes it a little more comfortable. Yes, when it comes to ergonomics, we can perhaps take a look at how the positioning of the stubs compares to a basic XSR 900 and the R7. Yamaha has shown us a wonderful graphic. I'll try to find it now so that we can show it to you here. But in any case, the handlebar is 93 millimeters further forward than on the base XSR 900, and it is 114 millimeters lower. So you can see that it's a really, really sporty riding position that has been chosen here, and you really have a lot of pressure on the front wheel. I have to say it really suits this character and this look in the end. And when I look into the cockpit at the front, it's a really cool thing. It would actually fit in with the comfort features, but I'll mention it here. You've got this front under the right-hand side panel, which is nicely lined with black plastic on the inside, but there's also an integrated USB-C port underneath, and you can put a cable in there to connect it to the handlebars. You could simply attach it yourself with cable ties, and then in combination with a cell phone holder, whether SB Connect, Quad Lock, or whatever you use, you could have a direct charging option. So here too, a lot of thought has gone into the design, and I have to say it's a cool solution. While we were talking about the adjustable footrests, I should also mention that the frame is really, really nicely done. They didn't leave the frame in black like on the standard XSR, but instead had this silver color scheme run over it, so that this retro claim, these frames on the racing bikes, which were simply silver in the past, is also fulfilled here in this respect. The triple clamp is in the same silver, the swing arm is in the same silver, and so it looks really harmonious, and this design is just great. And when we talk about the frame, for those of you who are interested, there is quite a difference if you compare it to the MT-09, but also compared to the basic XSR. We definitely have the longer wheelbase. We have a swing arm that is 5 centimeter longer than the MT-09, which results in a really, really long wheelbase of 1,500 millimeters. So for comparison, so that you can estimate that an MT-10 has 1,400 millimeters. So it's 10 centimeters shorter in terms of wheelbase. And yes, why did they do that? Of course, I think to emphasize this sporty characteristic, to give the vehicle a bit more stability. In any case, I found it very, very pleasant how this was solved here. The rear frame was minimally modified in order to be able to lock the seat and this cover perfectly in place. The bolted rear frame is always a quality feature for me, and I always think it's great because it's easier to replace in the event of a crash. You might not want to believe it now, but I think it always looks good when it's bolted on. We have also made a change to the steering head. We now have a 3 millimeter longer trail. This was solved with a different triple clamp or with different brackets in general, which are in between. The steering head is also 5 millimeters higher than on the base XSR 900, which means that the geometry has been slightly adjusted, also in the direction of more stability. And it has to be said that this simply underlines the race bike character, as they say. And it simply suits this XSR perfectly. Yeah. Even when it comes to tires, they have not been satisfied with just any basic materials, with classic cast aluminium rims. No, these are the spin-forged rims that you may already be familiar with, including some from the Yamaha portfolio. This means that we basically already have a cast rim, but it is then milled over to save even more weight. And that saves 300 to 400 grams per rim at the front and rear. And of course, it's great that this is also used here. That makes a difference. Tires are another area where attention has been paid to quality. No compromises were made here. There is the brand new Bridgestone S23 inside. And I was very grateful for that today because as I said, we put the pedal to the metal on the racetrack. And I have to say the tire is holding up. And even in sporty road driving, you could tell that the tire really, really takes a lot of punishment. We had stretches of bad asphalt, and we were able to try and provoke that a bit. Traction control on the sportiest setup, so to speak, and then just provocatively open the throttle at the apex and see, okay, when does the tire come? How does it behave? And you have to say that on the one hand, the tire is super good-natured at the limit, and on the other hand, this momentum is also well chosen, at which the traction control intervenes. So you realize that the bike is coming, it wants to break away, and this moment is still noticeable. And only then does the traction control kick in. In other words, the rider knows where the limit is, and only when it is exceeded, so to speak, does the traction control come into play. Really well done and really suits this sporty bike. Yes, folks, and that brings us slowly but surely to the end. I hope I was able to give you a better understanding of the model. Let me know what you think. Are you as excited as I am about the new XSR 900 GP? Let me know in the comments. Perhaps one final thing to mention are the prices. What does it cost in Germany? What does it cost in Austria? What does it cost in Switzerland? Have you now shown this in the chart below? And when will it be available? Perhaps also interesting information, it will be available from dealers from May. So you can go and admire it soon, go for a test ride soon. I think Yamaha will be delighted to see so much interest in this wonderful bike. And yes, with that, best wishes to you. I'm saying goodbye from sunny Portugal. Take care. See you next time.